Hey guys, it's Bree here at Blossom and Branch Farm, and today I am doing a very exciting project that I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and so I'm thrilled that I'm finally able to do it. And it has to do with leaves. So here I've got a bundle of willows. This is one of 4 of the bundles that I have. So I have 160 willow whips, and we are going to be building a living fence today. Let's go. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert in this. This is my first time doing this. I'm just taking you along, and I'm going to share some of the things that I have learned about doing a willow hedge or planting willows if you're interested in doing so. So why have I been wanting to do this project for so long? Well, one is that I have always loved the look of lush green hedges. And here in Colorado, it's fairly dry. We're kind of a semi-arid desert, and so finding plants that do well as a lush hedge are kind of hard to find. So when I learned that willows are a keystone species, that is, they bloom early, they support lots of different Lepidoptera, that's caterpillars and butterflies later in life. And truly, willows are one of the earliest food for pollinators. Willows not only bloom very early in spring, making them one of the earliest food for bees, but they also support all those different pollinators. And so that's one of the reasons why we have wanted to put in this willow hedge. Another one is because they look really cool. So we got these willows from Howard at Living Willow Farm, and you can head over to his website if you want to get lots of great inspiration. And I kind of waffled about whether I wanted to do more of a structure or if I wanted to do a hedge, and I decided that I wanted to do a hedge. I also wanted to provide some screening between us and the neighbors, and something that is green and also serves our ecosystem. There are some considerations if you are thinking about doing this. So let's talk about those. Number one is that willows can have a pretty extensive root system. So you don't want to plant a willow over, for example, your main water line or your sewer line or a gas line. While most water lines now are made with PVC, which means they're more impenetrable than clay pipe was in the past, for example, but we still really don't want to be planting a lot of things that could potentially shift pipes and move things. Okay, so willows are a unique plant because they can root from any part of the plant. So they can sprout roots from anywhere all the way up along the trunk or branches, which makes them really great for propagating like this. But it also can make them a bit of a nuisance. So if you don't want a bunch of willows sprouting, then make sure you're not using these for supports or those kinds of things, because if you stick them in the ground, they can root. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give each one a fresh cut. Now these ones have been in water a little bit longer than I'd like because of our construction here that you can hear in the background. So I'm gonna give them actually a fresh lop off the bottom, and that's just going to get the cambium of the plant exposed, which is going to help it take up nutrients. So I'm just going to stick these right in the ground. Now, if your ground is really, really hard, and our ground is hard, especially in some of these spots here along the way, and so in those cases, I'm going to be using a hammer and a rebar to help drill kind of a pilot hole for my willow. It's going to be easier to get these into the ground if your soil is moist. So our soil is moist here. I am just literally pressing these into the ground like stakes. That's going to ensure that there's still good soil contact around the willow whip itself. So I'm doing a foot spacing. So I'm measuring out 1 foot from the last one that I put in at the same angle. So here's 1 foot from there. And then I just kind of eyeball the angle, because what I'm wanting to do is make sure that all my connections are at about the same height. So that would mean I'd be sticking this one in at about this angle. I press it in as far into the ground as I can. And I just am pressing it in as far as I can, about 6 inches. And then I'm gonna water it in. And now I'm gonna connect my little ties here. So I'm gonna actually put a few more in before I do these connections. So the second one is going to go in about 3 inches from the one I just put in here. And I'm gonna put it in at a similar angle. It's okay if the angle is not perfect, because you can kind of fix that with your little connectors. Another thing to consider is that willows can get very, very large. So you probably don't want to plant them next to your house, because they also can get large and they can be kind of weak trees. They can drop limbs. And so this is going to be actually fairly close to our house, but We're planting it in a hedge, which means we're going to be pruning it every year. So that pruning is going to help minimize both the root size and also the above ground tree size. We're not planning on letting these get really any taller than 10 feet tall. So it's really just to serve as a hedge from eye level. So pruning them is going to help keep the root system to a minimum and help also minimize damage around structures. The other thing to consider is their soil type, what type of exposure they like in terms of sun. So they tend to prefer full sun. Some of them will grow in partial shade, but really they're going to do best in full sun, and they really like a lot of water. So this is something that people get turned off about with willows, is that they need a lot of water. And it's true, they are very good for growing around ditches. Even though in Colorado we're pretty dry and arid, actually the willows do well because we have heavy clay soil. Heavy clay soil is a really good water retainer, so it's going to have a lot of water retention in the soil. So as long as we can keep them somewhat watered, especially as they're establishing, the clay soil is really going to hold on to that. We're also going to help it hold on to the moisture by adding some mulch after we're done planting. So those are just a few considerations that you'll want to make if you're thinking about doing one of these willow hedges. The most tricky part is creating our little crosshatch pattern. So let's go take a look at how we're going to do that. Okay, so now that I've got a course of these in, I'm going to go ahead and come into my connectors. So you'll see how much it cleans it up once I get these guys on. So I'm going to start down on this end, and again, I'm making sure that all my connections are basically happening at the same level. So it's going to kind of straighten out all of these angles. I'm lining up this connection with the one next to it. Do the same thing as I go over. And then I'm going to do, now that I've got that first course done, I'm going to go up to the next level. And again, I'm going to keep them at the same level as the ones next to it. And then you can see as I'm going up, I'm also trying to center the next triangle attachment directly over this one. That's also going to help hold the diamond shape. So instead of attaching it over here, you can see that would skew it. If I kind of shift it all over and attach it here, that's going to help keep that true diamond shape going. And then immediately after planting these, I'm going to water them in. Willows are really thirsty. We want to make sure that they have water to start. I don't want to let them dry out. Okay, so we've got our entire willow trellis planted here. This is 160 willow whips that we planted in here. Annual maintenance is going to be looking like mostly pruning the tops. Willow will put off little side shoots as it grows. So it will not only grow up at the top like you can see here, but it also does these little side shoots. So you can either let those grow or you can trim them off, which is what we're gonna do, and use them to make things. We can use them for wattle fencing like we've been doing around our garden, or other structures or baskets. And so there's lots of great uses for willow. So we're going to be pruning off a lot of those, but you could also just let it go green. And then once a year at the top, we'll be taking an electric hedge trimmer and just going right along the top so that we're keeping it trimmed down and not letting it grow too large. The idea here is not to have towering willows, it's to have, you know, maybe a 10-foot, 12-foot screen of green, and also things that are going to help serve our native butterflies and be some good early food for our pollinators. I'm watering these in, and one thing with willows is they do need a lot of water, especially as they're establishing. So we're watering every day, and as you can see, the ground here is pretty rough because we've been obviously mid-construction. We still have all of this going on, so our ground is really, really compacted and cracking, and that plus clay is not good. So we've killed a lot of the soil life over here through this compaction, so we're going to be watering in, and I'm also watering with this ecto mycorrhiza. This is from Bigfoot, and there's two different types of mycorrhiza. So when we plant annuals, I often like to do an endomycorrhiza dip, especially in newer beds or beds that maybe have been tilled to help get them established. Those can usually use a little bit of a boost with the fungi and the soil life. So there's two types. Endomycorrhiza is more for our annual plants and tomatoes and zinnias and flowers and those types of things, where ectomycorrhiza is for woodier shrubs and trees. So we are going to be adding some ectomycorrhiza to our water as we're watering in these willows, and that's hopefully going to help jumpstart that association with the soil and get these guys nice and rooted into the ground. And then we're going to be mulching. So once I get everything nice and moist, I'm going to be daily watering, but also I'm going to be mulching the ground. That's not only going to help with all this cracking compacted soil, it's also going to help give a little bit more of organic matter back into this ground, and it's going to help keep the water in the soil, which is what the willows really want, is lots of heavy, moist soil. All in all, I'm excited. In 5-10 years, I might regret doing this project. I fully admit that. we might get to that point. Follow along, we'll find out.